What if that strange dream you had wasn't just a figment of your imagination? What if it was actually a direct message from heaven? An urgent warning sent by something or someone much greater than you could possibly imagine? What if, at that very moment as you were sleeping, an angel was trying to warn you about something that could change, or even save, your life? It may seem like an exaggeration to some, but for many people around the world, prophetic dreams were exactly that. Divine things camouflaged in images, sensations and symbols, which only made sense when the impossible happened. These are real, intense, often exciting stories, where the supernatural manifested itself in a subtle, but powerful way. Dreams that, at first glance, seemed meaningless, but which hid a spiritual message that no one else could hear. Only those who were ready to listen. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever woken up with that feeling that you saw something important? That someone was trying to tell you something, even if you don't know who? Maybe it was just an ordinary dream, or maybe it was one of those silent messages that angels use to reach us when we are most vulnerable and receptive. The truth is that there are times when the invisible reveals itself, and it almost always happens unexpectedly, like a soft call, in the middle of the night, like a touch that pierces the veil of sleep. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you, and even make you rethink the dreams you've had before. In this video, you'll learn 5 real stories of people who were saved or transformed by prophetic dreams. We are not talking about coincidences or theories, but about experiences lived by people like you and me, who, in the midst of chaos or doubt, received a subtle intervention, often without realizing that they were being guided by angels. Some of these people only understood what they had experienced much later. Others woke up with such profound certainty that it changed everything: the path they were going to follow, the journey they were going to take, the choice they were about to make. And it was exactly this decision, made from a dream, that a tragedy or opened a new door in their lives. These are stories that carry not only the mystery of the invisible, but also the beauty of faith, divine protection, and the certainty that they are never alone, even when we can't see who's next. To us, these stories are not just curious. They make us think. Are we also receiving signs and simply not paying attention? Do our dreams hold messages that we are ignoring out of fear, disbelief, or haste? Perhaps the answer is much closer than we imagine. Get ready, because each case you're going to hear now has a detail, a twist, or a sign that will make you look at your own dreams differently. And maybe, deep down, you'll realize that what seemed like just an ordinary night may have been a sacred moment. Now that you know what might be behind a simple dream, let me tell you the first story. But first, tell me one thing. Have you ever had a dream that seemed more real than anything? One of those that leaves your heart racing, as if it really happened. If this topic resonates with you, leave it here in the comments. What has touched you the most so far? Or share an experience of yours. It could be a detail, a feeling, or even that dream you've never forgotten. Sometimes, what you experienced can be the sign that someone on the other side needs to see right now. And look, if this type of content makes you feel something different, if it connects you with something bigger, deeper, like this video, it may seem like little, but this simple gesture shows that it is worth continuing to bring these stories, these messages that touch the invisible. When you like, comment, and share, you are helping this content to reach out to other people who are also seeking answers, signs, or perhaps divine confirmation. And if you feel like you found a place here where you can listen, feel, and reflect with an open heart, subscribe to the channel. This community grows with each soul that awakens, with each person who says, "I feel this too." Your participation here is what makes this channel continue, grow stronger, and reach those who most need to hear these words. Now, take a deep breath, because what happened to the first person on this list will affect you in ways you may not even expect, because there is something that needs to be said, and maybe that is exactly what your heart was waiting to hear. You know, there is no such thing as chance when it comes to spirituality. There is no such thing as coincidence when we talk about signs that touch the soul, and maybe you haven't even realized it, but the fact that you are here, now, listening to all of this with attentive eyes and an open heart, no wonder. There is something inside you that recognizes these words, a part of you that has felt this call before, even if only subtly. It could be an intuition, a feeling in your chest, a slight shiver. But whatever it is, it brought you here for a reason. If you've made it this far, it might be because Ozomion up there wants you to see this. Maybe it's time to wake up to a new perspective on life, on the invisible, on the decisions you've made, and on the way you've ignored or accepted the messages that come from above. Yes, I'm talking to you. To you who have had that feeling that something stopped you from doing something, that made you go back, that made you change a path or a choice without knowing exactly why. This is often how angels act, delicately, almost imperceptibly, but with deep impact. When you realize this, everything changes. Your mindset begins to transform. You stop feeling alone in the world and start to see behind the scenes of your own journey. Those details that once seemed random are now part of a much bigger puzzle. And yes, you are part of it. You are part of the revelation, not a spectator, but someone who is being touched, called, guided. That's why stories like Raphael's need to be told. He was an extremely skeptical guy. He never believed in any of that. He called it impressionable people stuff and said that dreams were just reflections of the unconscious. Until something happened. He had a strange dream with a woman he had never seen. In the dream, she was crying and telling him that he needed to change his route back home that night. He woke up feeling uncomfortable, but he made a point of ignoring it. He went about his day as usual, until it was time to go back. Already in the car, the dream came back to him like a flash. That woman crying, the urgent tone, the look that went beyond any logic. In doubt, he decided to change his route. 10 minutes later, he learned that on the usual route he would take, an armed robbery had ended with a fatal victim, a guy with the same physical characteristics as him. Raphael froze. That night he didn't sleep, not because he was afraid, but because for the first time he allowed himself to believe that perhaps there was something beyond matter, that perhaps he had been warned, and that perhaps, even though he didn't deserve it, someone had interceded for him. This is the beauty of spirituality lived in practice. It is not about dogmas or theories, but about experiences that break logic and reveal a hidden truth. We are supported all the time, but not always with words. Many times, we are guided, with silences, with symbols, with images that only make sense later. And all of this is part of a divine intelligence that sees the whole. While we only see a part, and there's more. When you start to see these things, when your consciousness expands beyond the visible, a silent certainty begins to emerge within you, a kind of confidence that goes beyond what meets the eye. It's as if, even in the midst of uncertainty, you know that you are being guided, that your life is not a coincidence, not luck or bad luck, but part of a greater plan, a plan that involves learning, protection, and yes, direct intervention when necessary. You may not see it, but you are surrounded by presences that want the best for you. They act behind the scenes of your journey, organizing details that you don't even notice. Sometimes, a delay that irritated you saved your life. Sometimes, a refusal was a deliverance. And sometimes, a seemingly meaningless dream holds the key to a transformation you haven't even imagined yet. All of this points to a truth that many are afraid to face. Life talks to us all the time, but we get distracted. We disconnect, we close ourselves off. But when you start to open yourself up to these possibilities, when you allow your sensitivity to return, the world changes color. You start to notice the details, the repetitions, the coincidences that align perfectly with what you needed at that moment. And that's when you understand, it's not a coincidence, it's a response, it's care. I know that this kind of revelation doesn't come to everyone all at once. Some people need proof, others just need a push. And there are also those who are already experiencing this, but just haven't found the words to describe it yet. Maybe you're one of those people. Someone who has felt it, dreamed it, noticed signs, but was afraid to believe it, to seem crazy, or to be judged. The good news is that you are not alone. More and more people are awakening to this type of perception, and this is creating a new collective consciousness, more connected with the invisible and with the spiritual essence of life.com. And here, that makes sense to me. If in some way this content touched you, reminded you of something, or brought light to a feeling you already had. Now, there is something I need to show you. A story with such specific details that even those who doubt it will stop and think. Because there is a question that many people ask themselves, even if they don't say it out loud. What exactly are prophetic dreams? How do we know if a dream was just a figment of our imagination, or if there was actually a message, a warning, a calling? The answer may seem complex, but it is actually simpler and more spiritual than it seems. Prophetic dreams are those in which the soul receives a signal before the mind can comprehend it. It is as if our spirit is directly connected to a higher frequency, a plane where past, present, and future coexist, and from there comes information. A message, something that needs to be understood and felt. It doesn't matter the religion, nor the level of faith. What matters is openness, sensitivity, the inner space to listen to something that doesn't come from outside, but that echoes from within with a force that cannot be ignored. And yes, these dreams happen to ordinary people. The people who have never even opened a spiritual book. People who do not meditate, do not pray, do not attend temples, but who, even so, are touched by this type of experience. And why? Because the sacred does not choose by appearance or label, it chooses by vibration. It manifests itself where there are gaps. And, often, these gaps appear in moments of pain, confusion, fear, or fatigue. When reason is silent and the soul, finally, is able to whisper, it is in this silent space that angels act, and not in the way many imagine, with open wings and blinding light. Often, they appear as symbols, as subtle voices, as images that repeat themselves. Other times, they appear as unknown people in the dream, with intense looks and striking phrases. And there are also cases in which not even the figure matters. What makes an impression is the feeling, the certainty that that dream came from a place that is beyond logic. Have you ever felt this way? Have you ever woken up feeling like you were warned, that you saw something that was yet to happen, that someone was trying to communicate with you, even if without words? Because these are the marks that differentiate an ordinary dream from a prophetic dream: the emotional impact, the sudden clarity, and the energy that remains even after you wake up. It's as if time stopped there, as if that moment were eternal, even if it only lasted a few seconds. And you don't have to be a medium, clairvoyant, or spiritualist to experience this. It happens to mothers who feel that something is wrong with their children, even though they haven't received any phone calls. It happens to people who, out of the blue, decide not to leave the house and avoid a disaster. It happens to children who say things that don't seem to be their own. Spirituality manifests itself everywhere, in the small details, in the pauses of the day, in the silent dreams of dawn. There is a story that exemplifies this vividly. A retired man named Ernesto, a simple man who had never been involved with spiritual matters, began to have recurring dreams about a red door. In each of them, he tried to open it, but something was stopping him. One night, he dreamed that he finally managed to go through this door, and, on the other side, he found a dark room with a lit candle in the center. A woman he didn't know said, "You need to look inside. The answer is within you." When he woke up, Ernesto didn't understand, but it kept ringing in his head. Days later, he decided to have a routine checkup, even though he hadn't felt anything. The results revealed a serious heart problem, silent but potentially fatal. The doctor said that if he hadn't discovered it at that stage, there might not have been time. And do you know what color the door was in the office where he received the news? Red, the same shade as the dream. What seemed merely strange, or even random, turned into a turning point. And even though he was skeptical, Ernesto began to look at dreams with more respect, because some messages don't come with explanations, but with signs, and it is our responsibility to choose to ignore or listen. The most interesting thing is that prophetic dreams often do not convey a clear picture of what is going to happen. They do not show a detailed script, they show energy. They show direction. They point to decisions, and that is where their true power lies. They do not come to control, but to warn. To bring awareness before chaos happens, to change the frequency of the mind and prepare the heart for what is to come. That's why ignoring this type of manifestation is like turning off a silent alarm that was placed there just to protect you. It may seem like an exaggeration, but that's exactly how spirituality works, without noise, without demands, just presence. And when you learn to read the signs, life starts to make more sense. The pieces start to fit together. Doubts calm down, and fear goes away. Because you understand that you are being guided, yes, but in a subtle, respectful, loving way. The transformation begins at this point, when you begin to see dreams not as nonsense, but as part of a larger process of communication. When you understand that these signs are invitations to grow, to change, to not repeat mistakes, to reconnect with something that may have been forgotten along the way. And even if, in the rush of everyday life, we try to ignore this, the truth is that spirituality always finds a way to touch those who need to be touched. Sometimes through a phrase, a song, a person, and sometimes through a dream. And when this happens, nothing is ever the same again, because once we truly feel that we are being cared for by something greater, loneliness loses its meaning, and fear turns into faith. Comment here, that makes sense to me. If at some point you have had one of those dreams that seem to want to say something, even if you haven't figured out what it is yet. Now, I want to show you a case that reveals how much the invisible can be more real than what we call reality. Because when we talk about dreams that save lives, it seems like a scene from a movie, right? But what I'm going to tell you now really happened. And the most impressive thing is that if this person hadn't listened to what he felt in his heart, he might not even be here to tell the story. This is the first of 5 signs that show how angels can silently intervene in our lives. And it begins with the story of Mark. He led an intense, fast-paced life, typical of someone who is always too busy to hear what the silence has to say. He worked at an engineering company, was involved in a big project, and everything in his life revolved around deadlines, results, and productivity. Spirituality, for him, was something distant. He had never stopped to think about it. Until one night, something different happened. The dream began simply. Marcos was in a car, driving down a deserted road. Everything was dark, but he didn't feel afraid. The strange thing was that, in the passenger seat, there was a figure he didn't recognize. He couldn't see its face, he could only feel its presence. This figure stared straight ahead, without saying anything, until, suddenly, the car stopped by itself, and the figure finally said, "Don't go, it's not time yet." Soon after, everything went white, and he woke up. Marcos wasn't the type to pay attention to things like that, but that dream had affected him in a way he couldn't explain. The phrase echoed in his mind like a real warning. It wasn't just any dream, he could feel it. The thing is, that very morning, he had a trip planned to visit a construction site in another city. It was an important commitment, one he'd had on the books for weeks. And yet, for the first time, he hesitated. Deep down, he knew it would seem ridiculous to cancel a work trip because of a dream, but that nagging feeling that something was wrong was stronger than any logical explanation. So he called the office and made up an excuse. He said he wasn't feeling well, that he needed to reschedule, and he stayed home. Hours later, news reports began circulating about a serious accident on the highway. A semi-truck overturned and hit 3 cars. Traffic was at a standstill for hours. Among the names released later was that of the engineer responsible for the project that Marcos would be taking part in at that meeting. The collision occurred at the same time that he would have been on the highway, following exactly that route. The car that was hit was the same as his. Same model. Same color. It was at that moment that the penny dropped. There was no longer any room for doubt. Something or somebody took him off that path. Someone whispered a different choice in his sleep. And, even though everything in his logic told him to ignore it, he listened, he trusted, and he was saved. Can you imagine the impact of this? The way someone's reality changes from a decision, based on something invisible but felt. This type of experience generates a very deep internal transformation, not only because of the gratitude of being alive, but because of their revelation that there is something behind the scenes of life taking care of our journey, a presence that accompanies us even when we are distracted, even when we don't believe in it. From that day on, Marcos was never the same. He began to pay attention to small signs, to sensations that would have gone unnoticed before. He began to reconnect with spirituality, not as an imposed belief, but as a free choice to listen more to what comes from within. His mentality opened up, his outlook on life changed, and he began to see the details with different eyes, because he understood that what seemed small was, in fact, big. Part of a bigger plan, a care that acts without fanfare, but that changes everything when you allow it to guide you. The most beautiful thing about all this is that the dream, although simple, brought a life or death decision, and it was through a symbolic image, a road, and a silent figure, that divine intervention took place. This says a lot about how angels act. They don't force us to do anything. They don't impose. They just show. They just suggest. And they give us the freedom to listen or ignore. That's why so many people have this kind of experience and still doubt, because they're expecting something grand, flashy, a spiritual spectacle. But the hidden truth is that the miracle is often in the details. It's in that dream that seems ordinary, in that inner voice that insists on saying, don't go, in that feeling that takes you out of automatic mode for just a few seconds, but that's enough time to change your destiny. How many times do we ignore this? How many times do we silence what our soul is screaming because we are too busy listening to our minds? How many tragedies could be avoided if more people trusted their intuition? Spirituality does not require proof, it requires presence. It manifests itself when you are open to feeling what cannot be seen, but is still real. And the closer you get to this sensitivity, the more your life begins to align with a deeper purpose. You stop living in survival mode and start living in awareness mode. Comment here, I'm on this journey too. If you've ever had to make a difficult decision, trusting only that inner voice that told you what was right, even when no one else understood. Now, there's one more story that needs to be told. And this time, the one who received the signal was a child. Because when we talk about prophetic dreams, many people still think that only adults are very spiritual. People could receive messages like that. But what about when a child, without any rational filter, without dogmas, without fears or judgments, becomes the direct channel for a warning that changes everything? And we are not talking about a common imagination or a childish daydream. We are talking about something so specific, so out of the ordinary, that it can only be explained by spiritual interference, or better yet, by a silent call from someone who acts behind the scenes of life to protect us. This is the second sign, and it comes through a little girl named Lara, a girl of only 6 years old, happy, spontaneous, the kind who lives with eyes full of curiosity and a light soul. Her parents, Camila and Rodrigo, lived in a simple house in a small town, surrounded by routine and tranquility. Neither of them had the habit of talking about spirituality. They were skeptical, practical, very connected to logic and what can be proven. Until one night, everything changed. Lara woke up in the middle of the night, panting and sweating, and went straight to her parents' room. She said she had a very strange dream, where she saw the house on fire, and everyone was asleep. In the dream, she tried to scream, run, warn people, but no one woke up. And then, a white-haired lady appeared and said, "Wake up now, tell them to look behind the stove." Her parents, sleepy, tried to calm their daughter down, said it was just a nightmare, and sent her back to bed. But Lara insisted, with wide eyes. She said, "She told me to tell you now. Now, Mom, behind the stove." That bothered Camila. Her daughter's tone was not typical. It wasn't a tantrum, it wasn't drama. It was something that came with urgency. In truth, Rodrigo, still reluctant, ended up giving in and went to the kitchen with his wife, more to reassure the girl than to believe anything. When he moved the stove away, the shock was immediate. The gas pipe had a crack, and the smell, until then imperceptible, spread slowly through the room. A spark, an automatic ignition, a simple match, and it would all be over in seconds. They turned everything off. They opened the windows. They took a deep breath. The impact was so great that Rodrigo sat on the floor, unable to say a word. The feeling was clear. Someone had intervened. But why a child? Why such a precise image? And who was the white-haired lady in the dream? Camila remembers that, when she asked her daughter the following day, Lara responded with the greatest naturalness in the world. "It's Grandma Maria, but you said she had already become a star." The detail is that this Grandma Maria was Camila's great-grandmother, whom Lara never met. She never saw any photos of, and who, curiously, lived in that same house before the current family moved in. The room where Lara slept was her room. The kitchen was built by her. Coincidence, or could this be the way the spiritual found to protect the lineage, the family, the blood? When these stories happen, we understand that there is no age limit to be a channel. That the divine manifests itself through those who are cleaner internally, more sensitive, more open, and who, if not children, have this pure openness. They have not yet been contaminated by the certainties of the adult world. They still listen with their hearts. That is why they are so receptive to the invisible signs that ordinary eyes do not see. This story reveals something profound. Prophetic dreams do not choose by age, position, or knowledge. They choose by vibration. And when a warning needs to be delivered, it comes in the most efficient way. And in this case, it came at the exact right moment, from the mouth of a child, as if the universe was in a hurry to avoid a tragedy. The impact of this experience on the family was enormous. Rodrigo, who laughed at everything that was intuitive, began to meditate. Camila, who avoided any conversation about spirituality, began to study energy cycles, body signals, and manifestations through dreams. But the most beautiful thing was what happened to Lara. She didn't boast or get scared. He simply said that he did what he had to do, as if that dream hadn't come by chance, but as part of a much greater calling, of which she simply took part. This is what few people realize. When an angel acts, he does not need to appear in physical form. It can manifest itself as an image, a phrase, a warning. It can use a mother's intuition, an animal's instinct, a stranger's warning, or a child's dream. The important thing is not how the signal arrives, it's what we do with it. And, in this case, a simple choice. Listening to her daughter saved a lifetime of memories, plans, affections. It saved the continuity of that story. When we hear this type of story, something changes inside us. Our vision broadens. Our sense of urgency increases. And, more than that, our sensitivity begins to be trained. We begin to realize how many signs we have missed. How many times have we ignored that shiver, that intuition, that repetitive dream, because we thought it was all in our heads? But is that really true? What if your inner child, that sensitive part that still lives inside you, is trying to show you something right now? What if the dreams you forgot this morning had a key, a direction, an answer that could change the course of your life? Maybe it's time to start listening again more calmly, to trust in what doesn't make sense, but that vibrates strongly inside your chest. Comment. Here, that makes sense to me. If you also believe that a child can be the channel for something greater, or if you have ever experienced a similar situation that made you rethink everything. Now, the next story is even more intriguing, because it involves someone who didn't even remember the dream until the day when everything happened exactly as he saw it. And when we realize that, even a child can be used as an instrument for such an accurate, unusual warning, it becomes clear that the invisible world is closer than we imagine. No matter your age, your level of understanding, or whether you believe or not, when something needs to be said, the universe finds a way to get the message across, and what you do with it can change absolutely everything. By the way, if this topic makes sense to you, I have prepared additional material that can further deepen this connection with the signs and messages that come from the invisible. It's something direct, simple, but extremely powerful. It's called Reading Your Birth Angel, and it was designed specifically for those who are going through phases of transformation, making important decisions, or simply want to feel more aligned with their own journey. In this material, you will understand in a personalized way how the energy of the angelic kingdom may be guiding you, even when you don't realize it, and this can help you a lot to identify the signs more clearly. Trust your intuition more, and make more conscious choices from now on. It's here in the description, but I might take it down in the next few days. So if it makes sense to you, check it out while it's still available. Sometimes, the right information at the right time can save you years of doubt and confusion, because the next sign involves a type of intervention that at the time it happened, no one noticed. It was only much later that the hidden truth behind that dream came to light, and the impact of it completely transformed that person's path. because when the sign comes from someone you have never seen before, who appears in the dream as a complete stranger, the mind tries to explain it in 1,000 ways. It was just a reflection of my day. It must have been some random memory mixed up. I have never seen this person. It doesn't make sense. But what if this unknown figure is, in fact, a presence sent just to deliver you a message and disappear? This is the third sign. And this time, the one who lived was Aline, a 32-year-old nurse who was going through a difficult phase in her life. She worked long, tiring shifts, lived under constant pressure, and barely had time to take care of herself. Despite always having been sensitive, Aline was so disconnected from her own spirituality that, when she dreamed, she barely remembered anything the next day. But on this particular night, the dream stuck in her mind in a way that seemed impossible to ignore. In her dream, Aline was inside an empty hospital. The hallways were all lit up, but silent, as if time had stopped. She walked without knowing where to go, until she saw a man standing next to a door. He was dressed in white, but not wearing a lab coat. His face was calm, serene, but completely unfamiliar. She couldn't remember ever having seen him before. And he didn't speak, he just pointed to an emergency staircase, as if to say, "Go this way." Aline hesitated, but something inside her made her trust the moment she touched the doorknob to the staircase. She woke up with her heart racing. When she woke up, she thought it was just another weird dream caused by stress. But the image of that man wouldn't leave her mind, and neither did the feeling of urgency. It was as if he was trying to protect her from something. A few hours later, already at the hospital, during the night shift, she was in the staff rest area when she heard a bang coming from the kitchen. When she went out to check, she noticed a short circuit in one of the sockets, and the smell of burning was already spreading through the air. Someone ran to get the fire extinguisher. He was quickly contained, but the scare was great. Aline only understood what had just happened when she realized that the emergency staircase closest to the kitchen was exactly the one from the dream. The same hallway, the same door, the same path, and at that exact moment, the image of the man pointing to the exit came back to her mind like a flash. It was as if he had said, "If it really happens, you will know what to do." She had no doubt that this was not just a coincidence. It was not a random dream. It was a warning, a silent training, a way to show the way before the danger actually arrived. What is impressive about this story is the way everything was planned behind the scenes, as if an invisible intelligence had set up a simulation in her dream, so that, when the real thing happened, she wouldn't freeze, she wouldn't despair. And in fact, that's what happened. Aline remained calm. She made quick decisions, and more than that, felt that she was not alone, that someone had already been there, before it all happened, just to make sure she knew what to do. When we talk about angels, many people still expect wings, light, apparitions. But the true spiritual impact often comes in these silent details. In a dream, in a strange but familiar presence, in a simple gesture that changes the direction of a choice. And if you've ever had this kind of experience with a face you've never seen, but that gave you confidence, perhaps you've experienced something similar. These revelations change our mindset. We begin to see that the world is not just what we touch, that behind every choice, every inexplicable feeling, there may be something much bigger working in our favor. And understanding this is not only beautiful, it is liberating. Because you stop walking in the dark, and you begin to align yourself with a more subtle wisdom. You begin to trust not only what you see, but what you feel. And that changes everything. Decisions become more conscious. Intuition becomes sharper, and you start living with a kind of invisible radar that protects you, guides you, and strengthens you. It's as if there were an inner compass activated by these experiences, a constant reminder that the invisible also has logic, even if it is not rational. And if there's one thing that Aline's story makes clear, it's that spiritual preparation doesn't always happen in deep meditations or silent retreats. Sometimes, it happens in a strange dream, with a face you've never seen. But that appears at the right time to change the course of everything. Here, that makes sense to me. If you've ever had a dream about someone you didn't know, who seemed to show you a path, and then it made perfect sense, even if it didn't seem like much at the time. Now, here's another experience that's even stronger. Because it wasn't the dream that warned you of the danger. It was what happened after it revealed that the warning had already been given long before. There are experiences that leave an immediate impression on us. Others only reveal their importance over time. Sometimes a dream seems confusing, too symbolic, and meaningless. And that is where the mystery lies. The message doesn't always come ready to be understood. Sometimes, it comes to be felt first, and only later, when something happens in real life, does the penny drop, the connection is formed, and we understand that everything had already been shown to us before. But in a subtle way, almost like a riddle from heaven waiting to be deciphered. This is the fourth sign, and it didn't come just once. It came as an insistent repetition, as if to say, pay attention, it's not over yet. The story is about Juliana, an art teacher who has been sensitive since she was a child. but who spent much of her life stifling her spiritual side due to criticism, judgments, and even fear of seeming exaggerated. But even though she denied it, the dreams continued, and it was one of them, or rather, a sequence of them, that turned on the alarm that she could no longer ignore. Juliana dreamed of a bridge, always the same one, narrow, made of old wood, crossing a deep valley surrounded by fog. She was there, alone, about to cross, but she never managed to complete the journey. In every version of the dream, something happened. A plank broke, strong wind made her fall back, or she simply woke up with the sensation of falling. It was always the same scene, the same elements, and one detail was repeated. On the other side of the bridge, there was a bright light, not blinding, but welcoming, in a soft voice that said, "You need to trust." For months, she had this same dream. She tried to ignore it at first, then she started writing it down, and finally, she decided to seek help, because it was affecting her. She talked to a friend who studied spirituality, who suggested that she interpret the symbol of the bridge as an internal crossing, a phased transition, a decision that she had been avoiding. And that made perfect sense, because Juliana was precisely at a point of professional impasse. She had received a job offer in another city, something that could change her career, but also meant leaving everything behind. She didn't feel ready. Clinging to security, she told herself that it was better to wait, that the right moment would still come, but the dreams didn't stop. Then one night, the scenery changed. For the first time, she was able to cross the bridge. The planks were firm, the wind had died down, the fog had parted, and when she reached the other side, she saw a figure with his back to her, holding a lantern, guiding the way forward. When she woke up, she felt peace, but also a different urgency, as if the message had been delivered clearly. Now it's up to you. The following week, Juliana accepted the offer. She moved to another city, began a new phase, and gradually realized that it wasn't just about work. It was about liberation, about trusting her own intuition, about listening to the inner voice that she had silenced for so long. The change brought challenges, yes, but it also brought a profound transformation of her mindset. She began to feel more connected, more whole, more guided, and the most curious thing, after the change, never had that dream again. The bridge had served its purpose. The repeated vision, which seemed like an illogical warning, revealed its truth over time, and it all made sense. This type of experience shows that signs do not always come with an immediate explanation. Sometimes, they appear as symbols, as fragments, as loose pieces of a spiritual puzzle that only fit together when the moment arrives. And if you pay attention, you will realize that life prepares you little by little. It whispers truths that we are not yet ready to hear, but they are still there, waiting for the right moment. Faith plays an essential role in this because it is what allows us to walk even without understanding everything. It is what sustains our steps on the bridge, even when our eyes cannot see the other side clearly. Having faith is not about knowing the destination. It is about trusting that there is a meaning behind the crossing, and that someone is watching over us, lighting the way. Even in the most nebulous parts of the journey, recurring dreams, especially those full of symbols, are like codes sent to our consciousness. Sometimes they repeat themselves because we have not yet opened our hearts to listen. Other times, because the right time has not yet come. But when we finally allow ourselves to feel, something aligns inside, as if the gears of the soul begin to turn along with the universe. And then, the path reveals itself. If you've ever had a dream like this, one that keeps repeating itself, that keeps coming back to you, that you can't seem to get out of your head, maybe it's time to take a closer look. Maybe it's not trying to scare you, but rather to prepare you. Maybe it's a warning that's trying to protect you from a mistake, a detour, or even a missed opportunity. Comment here, I'm on this journey too, if you have ever experienced this type of dream that seems enigmatic, but carries something greater hidden behind the scenes. Now, there is one last sign that closes this cycle with something even deeper, a message that was only understood after an unexpected spiritual reunion. There are dreams that wake us up with a start, others that make us change our minds, but there are also those that don't come to avoid something external, but rather to free us from something internal. Dreams that don't talk about tragedy or physical danger, but that hold a mirror up to us, that make us see what is dormant, ignored, accumulated, and that, even without noise, may be destroying us from within. Sometimes the greatest rescue is silent, and the angel does not come to save us from an accident, but to save us from ourselves. This is the fifth sign, and perhaps it is the most transformative of all, because it doesn't just change a moment, it changes the entire route. The person who experienced this was Gabriel, a 41-year-old man who on the outside seemed to have his life under control. A businessman, good-looking, respected in the professional world, but on the inside, the emptiness grew. Drinking too much, sleepless nights, impulsive decisions. He himself said that he no longer knew where he had lost his way. He no longer felt connected to anything, not even to himself. For years, Gabriel lived on autopilot. Work, parties, addictions, promises of change that were always postponed. Until, one morning, after yet another night of excess, he had a dream, and that dream changed everything. He was in an open field, in absolute silence. The sky was cloudy, the grass was dry. In front of him, a dirt road with two forks. On one side, a straight, wide path that went straight ahead, without curves. On the other, a narrow trail, full of rocks, hills, and a dense forest at the end. Between the two paths, a man in a white hood, with his back turned. When Gabriel approached, the man turned slowly, but his face was covered by an intense light. And then he said, "You already know what you have to choose, but you won't have the courage if you keep running away from yourself." Gabriel woke up in tears. He couldn't explain why, but he felt like he had just been pulled from an abyss. And that phrase echoed in his mind like a sentence. You already know what you need to choose, ... He didn't tell anyone. But in the following days, something inside him began to change. He started to stay away from parties, to decline invitations, to pay more attention to his own habits. He started to walk alone in the morning, without headphones, just him and the silence. As if he wanted to find his own voice again. Alcohol was left aside. Empty relationships were cut off. Businesses that consumed his energy were rethought. And little by little, something was rising up inside. A faith he didn't even know still existed. Gabriel began to pray again. Without formality, without rituals. He just talked, as if renewing a forgotten friendship. And in the process, he realized that he was returning home, not to his physical home, but to his spiritual home, the place where the soul finally breathes. There was no grand mystical revelation. There was no voice from heaven, no flashing lights. What happened was something even more powerful, a firm decision to reconnect. And it all started with a dream, a simple dream. To those who don't believe, it could be just a product of the unconscious. But for those who feel it with their hearts, it is the certainty that the spiritual kingdom never stops calling us, even when we forget about it. The most beautiful thing is that Gabriel did not go back to being the same as before. He became someone else, with a new awareness, with a new lightness, and most importantly, with gratitude. Because when we go through a true transformation, there is no regret, only gratitude for having woken up in time. This type of sign does not come to protect you from an external event. It comes to show you that life you are leading may not be the life your soul chose, that you may be moving away from your essence, your light, your gifts, and that you need to come back. Come back, not in the sense of regressing, but in the sense of align with what truly makes sense. Many people are waiting for something external to change, for a door to open, for an opportunity to fall from the sky. But they ignore that the greatest movement of change begins within, and that, most of the time, God uses our own dreams to light that spark. Because while the body sleeps, the soul awakens, and in this state, what is subtle can finally be heard. What you've seen so far shows that angels aren't just around us, they're on the journey, pushing us when we stop, rescuing us when we fall, and embracing us when all seems lost. And this last sign is proof that divine love does not wait for collapse to act. It anticipates, it whispers, it insists. All we need to do is stop running away and start listening. Comment here. That makes sense to me. If at some point in your life you also felt that you were being called to change, even without understanding everything, even without knowing where you were going, but with that inner feeling that you could no longer continue in the same way. Now, there is something that connects all these stories, something that you may never have realized, but that explains why certain dreams touch so deeply and transform so much. It's curious how, when we look at these stories with real attention, without the filter of disbelief or the rush of everyday life, we begin to notice something that goes beyond the surface. These are not just loose accounts of people who dream too much or are involved in spirituality out of emotional need. It's something deeper. There is a common frequency, a subtle pattern that connects these experiences in a way that is almost imperceptible to the common eye, but visible to those who allow themselves to feel it. An invisible thread runs through all these experiences, as if it were a secret code being delivered in scattered chapters, in dreams, in intuitions, in seemingly banal signs. Nothing random. Everything is part of a larger movement, the call to awaken, and the most intriguing thing is that this call does not follow predictable patterns. It has nothing to do with age, social class, creed, or level of education. People from all over the world, with completely different stories, report the same indescribable feeling. Something or someone was trying to communicate, not with words, but with emotion, a subtle but powerful presence, a push that appears in moments of inner silence, a warning that, at first glance, seems like just a strange dream, but that later, with time and repetition, takes on the contours of a revelation. And in many of these stories, there is a silent urgency, as if time were running out against something we do not yet understand. Pay attention. These dreams don't come with long lines or movie plots. They come in a direct, symbolic, intense way. An image, a light, an unknown place that somehow seems familiar. And even when the brain tries to rationalize it, it's just stress. It was just a nightmare. The body reacts differently. The chest tightens, the breathing changes, the skin crawls, because there is a vibration in these dreams that goes beyond the mind. It's as if something is being transmitted directly to the spirit, in a silent language that only the heart recognizes. And it recognizes, it knows, and perhaps this is the key. Understanding that these signals are not random noises from a tired mind. They are messages, directions, little lights lit in the darkness to remind us that even when everything seems out of place, there is a plan in action. A plan that sees the whole, while we only see parts. That understands the reason for losses, delays, unexpected encounters. That uses the improbable as language. That sends alerts when we stray too far from what is essential. These signs come when the soul no longer finds the strength to ask for help. When the heart is exhausted from waiting for answers from the world. When everything seems to be at a standstill, but inside something cries out for change. And that is when the spiritual world approaches. Not with noise, not with a spectacle, but with signs that touch exactly where they need to. A phrase in a book, a repeated number, a face, in a dream, an unexplained shiver, a premonition that is later confirmed. And the stories we hear, that we share, that so often seem merely curious or beautiful, actually carry a silent force of transformation, because they reveal a truth that is often forgotten. Prophetic dreams. Spiritual signs are not reserved for the chosen in the traditional sense. They are for those who are available, for those who listen, for those who have not yet lost the ability to feel, even in the midst of chaos. The spiritual world does not seek out the wisest. It reveals itself to the most sensitive, to those who, even without understanding everything, allow themselves to believe. Notice how, in almost all of these dreams, there is a sense of urgency, but it is not fear that dominates. It is the certainty that it matters, that there is something bigger trying to get your attention. As if, for a brief moment, time were bending and saying, "See with different eyes. This has meaning." And, in that moment, it is not an external voice that speaks. It is something that vibrates inside, that resonates with the soul, that leaves a trail, that leaves a mark. And, no matter how much the next day tries to erase it, there is something there that cannot be forgotten, because the spiritual, when it touches, leaves an impression. And perhaps, what differentiates those who experience these signs from those who never notice them is not luck, but rather the ability to be present, to pay attention to what seems small, to look more than once at what the world insists on calling coincidence, because sometimes the sign comes in disguise, in a song, in a person who crosses your path, in an object that appears out of nowhere. And the question that remains is, how many signs have you passed by unnoticed? How many dreams have you disregarded because they seemed absurd? What if the very thing that seemed strange was the answer you silently asked for? We have been taught to seek logical, concrete, visible explanations, to trust more in what can be proven than in what can be felt. But the spiritual world does not manifest itself through logic. It communicates through vibration, through emotional impact, through the silent truth that the heart recognizes even when the mind tries to deny it. And recognizing this type of signal requires courage. Courage to feel, even when it doesn't make sense. Courage to listen to what cannot be heard with the physical ears. Courage to surrender to something greater, even if it is still invisible. Therefore, perhaps the greatest invitation behind these stories is not just to believe in dreams or angels, but rather to stop running away from what insists on touching you inside. Stop ignoring the shivers, the synchronicities, the repeated messages, because the more you silence what you feel, the further you move away from the path that was designed for your soul. Every time you ignore a sign, it is as if you postpone a reunion, a discovery, a turning point. And the most beautiful thing about all this is that the impact of these experiences is not limited to those who live them. It spreads. It reaches those who listen, those who identify with it, those who feel that something inside them is beginning to awaken as well. Because hearing a story like this can trigger the memory of something that has been dormant within you. It can validate an intuition that you have been carrying in silence. It can be the push you needed to pay more attention to your own signs, to what you dream, to what you feel, to what you deep down already know. So, if any part of these stories touched you, maybe this video, this moment, this conversation, is also a sign. Not a sign from me, not from the screen, but from the sky, from that invisible plane that has been trying to reach you for ages, and that now, finally, has found a gap to whisper, "I am here, and you are not alone." If this call resonated somewhere within you, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." Because sometimes, all we need is to recognize that we're not alone, that there are others feeling the same, experiencing the same signs, seeking the same answers. And it's in this recognition that the path begins to open up, because there is a truth that connects all of this, and it explains why, even when everything seems lost, the heart insists on believing that there is something greater guiding each step. And when you start to recognize these signs, even if you don't yet know how to interpret them completely, something inside you changes. It's almost imperceptible at first, like a gentle vibration, but it becomes increasingly present. A sharper intuition, a sensitivity that begins to separate what is noise from what is message. And then, without realizing it, you start to make different choices. You start to listen more and talk less. You start to observe the backstage of life more than the illuminated stages. And all of this comes with a silent but powerful question. What is this trying to show me? What these stories reveal to us, deep down, is that there is a spiritual intelligence acting behind the scenes of our reality. A force that does not follow the logic of human decisions, but that acts with millimetric precision on our encounters, our pauses, even on the pains we wanted to avoid. The hidden truth here is that nothing that happens in our path is random. Even the misunderstandings carry revelations. Even the silences bring answers. But to realize this, we need to adjust our gaze to go beyond the surface and see with our soul. How many times have you experienced something seemingly simple, but it left you with that strange feeling that there was something behind it? A quick encounter, an absurd coincidence, a phrase that someone said without even realizing it, and that struck you as if it were made for you. That's it. That's how signs arrive. And most of the time, they don't come in the form of a spectacle. They come in subtlety. Because the spiritual doesn't shout. It whispers. It waits for you to be present enough to hear it. And from the moment you accept that these signs exist, another type of transformation begins. The internal one. The one that no one sees, but that changes everything. Your mindset begins to align. With a higher frequency, you stop looking for explanations outside and start asking the right questions inside. And this doesn't mean that you'll understand everything right away. It just means that you'll start to feel when something isn't just a detail. It's a direction. This is a journey that requires presence. And presence is not being awake, it is being awake. It is having the courage to look within, when everything outside seems meaningless. It is trusting that, even without knowing the final destination, there is a path being traced with each step. And sometimes, the answer you are waiting for is precisely in that dream you ignored, in that feeling you called nonsense, in the warning that repeated itself 3 times. But you kept going as if it were a coincidence. But the spiritual world doesn't give up easily. It comes back. It insists. It finds new ways to get your attention. And the more you resist, the more the signals increase in intensity, not to scare you, but to wake you up. Because somewhere inside you, there's something that already knows, that already understands. And it just needs you to stop, breathe, and say, okay, I'm listening. Now, oftentimes, when life puts you on pause, when something you planned goes wrong, or when a situation forces you to stop, that is one of the biggest turning points in your journey. It is not a punishment, it is a realignment. The invisible taking you away from where you no longer belong. And yes, it can hurt, it can feel like a loss, it can feel like a setback. But if you pay attention, you will realize that these moments always come surrounded by little signs that were already trying to warn you. You just weren't ready to listen yet. That's why so many people report having the same kind of dream. Just before something important happens, it's as if the universe is laying the groundwork in advance. As if to say, you'll figure this out later, but for now, just trust. And this trust isn't blind, it's intuitive. It's born from a connection with something bigger, something that knows you better than you know yourself, that knows what you need long before you can ask for it. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this is where many people get lost, expecting the signs to be as clear as a traffic sign, when in fact they come in the form of symbols, repetitions, sensations, and it's no wonder. It's because this language was made to touch the soul, not to convince the mind. That's why you can hear someone explain something to you 1,000 times and not change. But all it takes is one true spiritual experience, a dream that shakes you inside, and your life changes forever. This is the real impact of signs. They don't come to give you certainty. They come to give you awareness, an awareness that expands, that frees, that brings you closer to who you really are. And this process is continuous. It doesn't end with a dream. It doesn't end with an answer. It's a daily construction of perception, of attention, of sensitivity. Because the more you open yourself to this, the more you begin to live in alignment with that which before seemed just a coincidence. And here's a truth you might need to hear. Prophetic dreams are not rare. Rare is the attention of those who receive them. Because everyone dreams, everyone feels. Everyone, at some point in their life, has had that shiver, that internal alert, that feeling that something was happening on a plane that the eyes could not see. But most people ignore it. Forget it. Go back to sleep inside. But if you've come this far, it's because something inside you is still awake. You still believe. You still feel that there's something bigger guiding every detail. And maybe that's why you're being prepared. Maybe this video didn't appear by chance. Maybe, just maybe, this conversation is activating memories that were dormant inside you. Fragments of dreams that now make sense. Signs that come back to your mind with a new light. And you begin to understand that you were never alone. You just needed to be ready to listen. Here, that makes sense to me. If you felt that, in some way, these words touched a point that was forgotten. Because when we validate what we feel, the journey changes. And there is a force that acts at the exact moment in which you recognize what you have been trying to see for a long time. If you've come this far, it's because something inside you recognized the truth that was being told. And it's this connection that makes all of this so valuable. So, if this content brought you clarity, if at any point you felt like someone was speaking directly to what you're experiencing inside, take advantage and subscribe to the channel. We're building a space for those who feel, for those who seek, for those who want to see beyond. Leave it in the comments. This message was for me, just so I know you stuck with me until the end. And so other people who read this feel like they're not alone on this journey either. And if this video really touched you, leave a like, not out of obligation, but because maybe this connection needs to be remembered more often. This helps this type of content to continue finding people who are also ready to listen. There is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there. There is more coming that may make a lot of sense to you.